Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We have a special treat today. We have Cindy Nolet, and she has come here to share her love story. She and her husband have been married for quite a while, and they've retired together. And they are one of those successful love stories for everybody who is dreaming of marriage or dreaming of connecting with someone and lasting for a lifetime. She's here to tell us about that and be our inspirational story for the day. Thank you for coming on, Cindy.
Well, thank you for having me. And I love your theme of rock your cradle. And sometimes I feel like I did rock it, and other times it was rocking me. But I'm here now as a veteran, and I hope that I can just be inspiring to those who are maybe not in the same footsteps or the same pace that I have. And I just love the idea that women are empowering women, and that stories are really good teachers.
And you are a retired hairdresser in the Niagara Falls region, and you've been married for how long now?
We've been married for 26 years.
That's amazing. All right. Well, can we start off with hearing about you and where you grew up and how you came to meet your husband and your love story? This is going to be fabulous. Thank you.
Well, yes, thank you. I like the way that you broke things up as who I was before I was married and had children, and then how we progressed through those three major phases. So whenever I graduated high school, I was young. I was only 17, and I kind of got a little bit shunned from my friends when everybody was going off to college and university, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I ended up just washing hair for this lady. And then I ended up, following through with schooling and becoming the hairdresser that really served me well. And I really like in this day and age that we're starting to get back to inviting our children to go through trades and not just go through all the books. And there's benefits to both. But this served me so well. And there's so many things that I just love to share with the audience that, get your trade. I was my own boss. I was at home with the children, and, I could scoot off wherever and still manage to, make my clientele really happy. And, we had this really good relationship. They're actually very, very loyal. And even through moving 3 different times, they followed me to my next home salon. And so, yeah. And we just retired through the COVID incident, and I'll always be a hairdresser, obviously. And just wanted to say, so my career picked me more than what I picked it, and I stayed with it the whole time, and I'm really happy about that.
And you said you met your husband through your career.
Yes, that's true. So I grew up around the Ottawa area, and then I was actually went through kind of a sad and heavy love story. I was dating for like 6 years to this fella, and then that, ended, and that forced me to come to this area. And so it was just my, building myself, living on my own, and starting a whole new clientele and this and that. And so I ended up in the Niagara region, and trying to find that perfect fella. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I'll never find that perfect fella. And then I was told, write a list of everything you want in a man and put it in your Bible. So I did that, and then I just surrendered to it all. And I had a lot of blind dates that I'd rather not go through. So this time, this lady said, how are you ever going to find your husband if all you do is go to a girl's gym and go to church and work and never go out? Because, when you stand on your feet all day, you don't go out very much. And I said, well, actually, I saw this really good looking guy in church the other day, and I described him to her. And she said, oh my gosh, that sounds like somebody that works with my husband. And so behind the scenes, she went to her husband, and that man went to this now husband and said, hey, do you ever go to this church? And he says, no, but I can. And so I'm like, okay, no more blind dates. Like, if somebody wants to meet me, send them into the salon, because I can't go through that anymore. So that actually happened, and he sat in my chair, and I knew who he was. And I don't know if he knew the whole thing, but I was just really good at having a poker face. And so after he went home after his haircut, and then asked me out the next day. And that was like, we had a coffee, and I was actually in a hair competition in Toronto. So I said, okay, I'll meet you at the end of the day. And then after that, we were 3 months after that that we were engaged from the very first time I saw him. And then and then we were married in September of that year. So it was 7.5 months from the time I met him to the time that we were married. And it wasn't because we were pregnant or anything. It was just because we just wanted to get married. He's older than me, and then I was 27 at the time. So you kind of have, who you want and who you don't. You know a little bit more about who your partner is going to be after all those blind dates. You kind of know. And that was the beginning of the story.
That's a really fun beginning and very romantic and it sounds almost like a movie. I think it should be adapted into a movie. So what were the sort of things you put on your list?
Oh, well, I wanted him to be professional. I wanted him to be not just a pencil pusher professional, sorry to any offensive, but I wanted him to work with his hands. And then I said, I want him to be Catholic and not too much debt. And then I also described that, dark hair and a little bit more like stockier than like a taller and thinner person. And that was it. I got on my list. I did.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So was he looking to date at that time as well?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes. I think actually more than I was. At that he owned a house just in the same neighborhood that I was cutting hair. And it was a cute little historical town. And I'm sure he drove by that salon how many times, and it was just so close, you're just so close to crossing paths. And then, fast forward, his family is in Montreal. So he speaks French. And then for him to go back to Niagara where he lived, where he moved to as an adult, he would have to pass very close to the highway that would take me to my hometown. So when I go see my family, we just kind of scoot off the highway and then we go see his family. So it was one of those things where the fate was just so close.
Oh, that is brilliant. So obviously we have to hear how he proposed and then how the wedding was. And then we can get into the real life with the kids coming and all of that.
Yes. Well, it was a very interesting. So he proposed in May, and it was really cold, and he took me on a picnic. And once he had that ring in his, he made the ring for me. And they always say once the fella has that ring, it burns a hole in their pocket. And so he took me out on this really historical place in Niagara, and he asked me to marry him. And I swear to God that at some point I looked out at all the shrubbery and everything wasn't moving. And then I'm like, what happened? Like it was like somebody pushed pause on the wind. And then of course I said yes. But it was really surreal that happened in the park. And I was definitely saying yes to that one.
And you got married 4.5 months later?
Yes. Yeah, I got married in my hometown. And it was interesting because everything was so quickly planned. I just had one stand up, and my husband just had one stand up. We didn't have any of the other, like all the bridesmaids, because it was 5 hours from where I live. So you're trying to plan a wedding 5 hours away. And then of course his parents were even further. They're like 7.5 hours away. And my mom and my mom's aunt, or my mom's sister, my aunt, said, "Oh, why don't you have the twins in the wedding?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't want to have anybody in the wedding, but thanks. Have them come, but I don't want to have to plan all that." So then, I can't remember where oh yeah. And then the reason why we got the church in such notice was because there was, like a country fair going on, and nobody gets married when you have that fair going on. And so I'm like, oh, wow, the church is available. That's a miracle. And then my friends that came to the wedding, because they still live there, they're like, why would you have your wedding on the fair weekend? I'm like, I don't know why. I forgot. But it worked out good for us.
So that sounds funny. You got married, and then where did you guys move to? Did you stay?
Both. Sorry?
Did you stay where you both were working?
So I left my apartment and I moved into his home, and I stayed working in that place for a while. And then we had a few trips. So I'd like to share we had a honeymoon in Cuba, and then we thought we would have another little getaway in Paris that spring. And so it turns out that's where I'm conceived, in Paris in the springtime. And there was this lady walking, and I saw her like looking and smiling, and we were alone in this parkway. She was like smiling and smiling, and I was looking down at myself thinking, like, what's wrong? Like, is my stomach sticking out? And I said to him, I go, I think she thinks that I'm pregnant. And we turned out, because once we got home, my doctor said, yeah, you're having twins. And so I was probably showing a lot quicker than most, but I wasn't showing then. So somehow that woman, maybe I was showing then, but for some reason that woman was like staring at me like I was glowing in pregnancy. And that scene was just imprinted in my mind, because I thought she was mistaken.
So that sounds romantic as well. So you're very nice time. And you had twins then.
Yes, yes. So then I didn't know we had twins in our family, other than there was two little flower girls that were invited to go to the wedding. I didn't realize. But then on his side of his family, he has identical twins too. But for some reason, I didn't cue in on any of those scenarios, and so we end up having identical twins together. And probably better that I didn't know it was coming. Just kind of happened. So we managed together. That was a wonderful gift, and it was wonderful gift. It's just, again, I had to lean into my faith and just make sure that I wasn't worried about certain things. Turned out that we had to change doctors and then change cities, and then we end up going to like a university hospital. And my idea with having like the doula was not going to happen if we had to go in, and I had to have a C-section and this and that, and it worked out okay. It wasn't exactly the home birth that I thought I was going to have, but that worked out really well. We were always like ahead of anything that could have happened. And then the one day we knew we were having girls. We had a lot of ultrasounds, and they knew that there were girls, so we actually named them in the womb. He named one and I named one. And then there was one day leading up to Christmas, they said, okay, you're done. You're not going to work, because the blood flow was starting to like have problems. So they wanted to make sure that each of the babies had a proper blood flow. They said, nope, you got to get your feet up. But I didn't have to like go in the hospital or anything. So that Christmas, I had to disappoint my Christmas clients, because I wasn't going to work, but I managed to stay at home, and the time just flew. And by the time we had our first anniversary, I was 5 months, and we squeezed in one more trip. We went to St. Martin, and I swear that the people on the beach thought that I was going to give birth, because I had twins. So I looked like I was extra large, but we had the okay from the doctor. So we had one more trip from then. And then when the babies came, it was a beautiful day in February, and we had our family come and visit. But other than that, my mother-in-law was able to spend 6 weeks with us and help us out with that. God bless her. And then after that, it was just kind of he and I. He had a corporate job, and he was working all day, and then he'd come home. And by the time the twins were 3 months, I was storing some of my breast milk and hoping that they would be able to have that by the time I go to work. So we would like tag team, and I'd go out to the salon that we had in the garage at the time, and then he would handle these two little babies who were still 3 months, right? They weren't really sitting up on their own too well. And I was so disappointed whenever the breast milk ran out so quickly. I was devastated, because I was like nursing these two, and then I'd put them down, and then I'd go double pump, and then I might eat something, and then darn little kids would wake up again, and it was just 24 hours of trying to, and so I was actually really disappointed about that milk, but I'm thankful that we had that was 3 months of that anyways.
That just reminds me of the insanely intense need and schedule that you have when you do have those young babies. And it's crazy, and it's sleep deprived, and it's exhausting. And it feels like every day is taking so long, but then after that time has passed, it feels like it was really brief.
I agree. Like time for me goes way faster now as a retired person than it it seemed to then, and I needed that time. I needed to be able to finish all those tasks and some self-care. But it's true, it did kind of drag on. But I still managed to collect a whole bunch of pictures and, do a whole thing before I had a nice cell phone back then. So it was basically like developing those pictures. Yeah, and we had a really beautiful backyard and we had a really nice neighborhood. But I just remember those kids, they didn't need to have their little nappies. And I was just hoping, please go have your nappy. And if we were to think about the ups and downs, in Canada, and maybe not, maybe it's worldwide, there was this Berber method where they had said, let your children cry to sleep. And if I was to have a regret, I would not ever do that again. I'd go in and I'd try to soothe them and, pat them in their little cribs and stuff. But damn it, I shouldn't say that. I would have picked them up and put them in my arms and I would have slept hopefully with them. But that was my regret, to follow that advice, because I was trying really hard to let this process work. And I would feel that I think that there would be a risk of having them bond with the mom, especially with the fact that I had a C-section. And if I was to go back and tell myself, I would say, make sure that they have time on your chest. Because at the time in this university hospital, I think there was like 12 people in that room. There was nurses and doctors, and everybody. I had a doctor, the kids had a doctor, and everybody had nurses. And then during all that time, like my husband got to hold one, and then my sister got to hold one, and all I got to see was the little nose go by. And I thought, why wouldn't they give that chest time? So if I was to go back and encourage another mommy. And then there's the other thing too, where they're talking about leaving the umbilical cord on a little bit longer for the kids. And I think that I would go back and say, hey, is that something we can do? But other than that, I have bonding with my children. In fact, we have the boomerang kids that keep coming back home to live. So I don't think the bonding was fractured too badly back then.
Yeah, things have changed a lot since, and how they approach. I think a lot of places now leave that umbilical cord longer. Oh, I did want to mention something before I move on too far forward. When you said nappy, you were referring to sleep, yes? Okay. Because here in the UK, when someone says nappy, it means diaper. That's the phrase over here. So I just want to clarify for anyone listening in the UK, she was actually referring to nap time. And were they good? Were they, I hate to say good, but because this is one thing everybody says, oh, do you have a good baby? And what they really mean is, does your baby sleep a lot? And are they quiet, and do they not bother you that much? But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, were they healthy and growing well?
They were healthy and growing well. They were only 2 ounces apart and 2 minutes apart. So me getting off my feet was a good idea, so that whole blood flow would be shared between them. So that was really fortunate for that. I guess they were sleeping, but I was chewing up the time doing whatever I was supposed to do with, cleaning up and, doing the breast milk. But when they were little and they were supposed to be sleeping, they would want to get out of their little beds, because they had those little toddler beds later on. And then I remember putting them in bed and then holding the doorknob. And my gosh, I don't know how strong they were, but they were pulling on the doorknob to open the door. And then I'd walk them down the street. We have a double stroller, and I'd be walking down the street and I'd go look, and they had their eyes wide open. And I'd be walking and walking, trying to get them to sleep, and they'd be looking at everything. I'm like, who's this walk for? Because it's certainly not for me. But going forward, they had a 7 o'clock at night, go to bed 7 o'clock or 7 o'clock. And now between my husband sleep and my sleep, I'm an early bed person. And so I've created 2 more of me, because everybody goes to bed early, except for my husband. He likes to stay up and give himself a treat with sports and such. So later on, it turns out that they were really good sleepers, but some of those times I felt like they weren't.
Yeah, I'm very similar with some of my kids. They some of them, in fact, all my kids sleep pretty well when I can convince them to actually go to sleep. It takes a little while sometimes, especially as they get older and they decide they want to stay up and do random things that said, no, you reach your bedtime, go to sleep. So they are all grown up now, and their childhood, was it a happy childhood for them and for you guys?
What was truly happy for us, looking at them, like, as I guess I had a surprise when they were little and their hair was just starting to grow, like as a newborn and into like, the first month or so. And I'm looking at their eyes, and there's, they have the blue eyes when they're first like little, and then they develop their eye color. And I was so busy looking at their eye color that I didn't realize that they had this big curly head of hair, and it was the cutest, both of them identical, cute little hair. And I was so pleasantly surprised because I never dreamed that they would have that beautiful curly hair like that. And they still do. They still have that beautiful hair, and they have like hazel eyes like their dad. And that's nice too. I like that combination. So the curls didn't come from me and the eyes didn't come from me, but people say they do look like me. I know I'm the mom.
Fair enough. So if you were going to advise, well, I know you raised your children, and can you talk a little bit more about your marriage and how you've kept it strong and why you're so happy together?
Yes, we're really happy together at this moment. And then there's times where we're not, but I think it's important not to dwell on the time that somebody's a little bit down, because if one person's down and then you join in, now you have two down people. So if you're trying to say, okay, I see, I see that. And then when I was discussing this with my husband, just like, how did we keep together like that? And then his response was like, it's important to stay humble, and not worry the world with your whole, drama, because, there are, dramatic times in my life. My husband's really a steady Eddie guy. Like I love the way he is. He never speaks before he thinks. In fact, sometimes he thinks too long and never speaks. And then I'm kind of waiting, like, okay, like, how are we going to discuss this? But he doesn't have that trigger, to blurt out stuff like that. And I was a little more of a hothead when I was younger. So I think that I was joining in with that. And I think, I want to go back a little bit to, when I had my doctor's advice. She said, why don't you get the injection for the birth control so that you don't forget and be sleep deprived and then end up with twins. And I don't know how many people, my clients, they just love to say that, well, you're going to get pregnant again and you're going to have boys. And then so many people were talking about that. And she already said something. And so I got that injection. So I didn't forget it. Because again, we were writing down bowel movements. We were writing down who had what breast on what side. We have these little pieces of paper everywhere. Who went to the bathroom? Who ate? Who did this? Who did that? And it was like kind of figuring out that everybody was even, trying to make sure that nobody was forgotten. So I did that, and immediately I realized that shifted my hormones so much. And then I'm like, 3 months. I don't want it in there now. I don't want it in there 3 minutes. And so I had to go through that whole. And unfortunately, if your children, if you're already going through those hormones, so I don't know what was what, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I regret that. I'm scared. I don't want that. So I didn't want to have that in there, and I was stuck with that. So that was kind of like that was one of those times where I was like really expressing I'm tired and, I'm needing more. And I wasn't really like weighing my words properly. And then after that, I was like, didn't want to go on any kind of birth control. And then my husband wasn't quite ready to do his part yet. So we had like a discussion one time, like, you need to do this now because I can't keep doing that. So that was a little bit of a slippery slope. And so then he came to terms with it, and he got that taken care of. And then, that was okay after that. But I did notice, and then the doctor wanted to give me other medicine for my mood. So then I did actually try something within those, I don't know, we'll say around the 5-month mark from pregnancy to this. And so I'm not one to take anything now. And so I weaned myself off of that. And then he worked on his thing. And we had a clash when I was going through all those meds, and then he wasn't ready to do his part. So there was a crash then, but we managed to keep going. And traveling is really good. He always wanted to keep going away with us, with the family or without. We tried to get someone to step in and get away. For us, going to Cuba was really easy. And then you just go there and you're like nothing, like you just sit and relax and soak up the sun and the ocean. And still we've traveled quite a bit and brought the family. And then we did where we'll wed on dates ourselves. And then we'd go where I'd go on one date with one daughter and he'd go out with the other. And then we'd switch the next week. And then we forgot about that. And then life got in the way. But you just always trying to, just make somebody be heard and be seen. Because for twins, they were really good. They shared things really well. Of course, they had to. I'd like to say that it was easy in a way because both children were doing the both interests, so that they like the same games, they like the same television show, they like the same activity. So in that respect, it was really easy that way. But we wanted to be able to put in the work really hard at the beginning and make sure that we had the rewards afterwards. So we really made sure that we made them independent, but we also had this whole thing where we wanted them to know that they had us. It wasn't too long, and they were, getting their own cereal and sitting in front of the TV in the morning, and then those kinds of things. So yeah, we managed, and he was still climbing the corporate ladder. And by this time, I had incredibly, how do you say the word? Dedicated clients, like incredibly dedicated. So I never had to go look for work. And I'm not like, I don't worry about money, that's not my language really, but he's always has that inflow. So that made my not worry okay, because has a good job. And I was kind of doing the hair automatically by then. Like it wasn't like I had to go out and learn anything new. So it was relatively easy because it was a known skill. And then we just kind of managed through different things. And then later on, when the kids, we were talking earlier about me just having the English language and him having the French, and I wanted and English, obviously. And I wanted to put my kids, I wanted to get them in there to get me, because I was so close to Ottawa when I grew up that I should have had a French language, but it wasn't the thing when I was little. So we put them in the French school and that whole thing, and that caused more, I would have to be their taxi, because they just couldn't just go across the street to the school anymore. And that was hard work. But again, now they both have bilingual, tongues, and they can use that in their work that they have now as two adult women. So that was worth the effort.
You understand French?
I can understand French when I know what the subject is. And if somebody goes off onto another subject, I may have to ask some questions. But that's okay. I don't mind doing that.
Oh, so it sounds like that sacrifice was worth it. Well, it sounds like a lot of the sacrifices you've listed, it's nice to see the result from them coming out the back end of it. Everything that you've worked so hard for.
We have two very different, independent young ladies. I'm referring to them here as twins because I'm trying to maybe just show a deeper picture of somebody that's just popping in on your podcast. But I never referred to them as that. They had some friends who would say, hey, can the twins come over and play? But I wanted them to know that they never had to be the same. And they just, but they, and to a point where they were identical in look, like for a long time. And now they have different heights and different, a little bit of different bone structure almost. So they've developed into their own person. People still call them twins, and people. So if you had a pie plate and you cut it out, they were identical here, and they still are. But the rest of them developed to whatever way they needed. And it's really interesting. And I love that and some of them would be the leader. So one of them would be like the first time that they would ride their bike first. And then somebody would do soccer first. And then sometimes they'd be the second. So they each had their strength and then their pullback. So it was nice to see when each of them kind of took the reins and sometimes just let the other one see how that goes for them. And I see, then I'll learn from it. They're cute.
And what have they decided to do now as they've grown?
For work?
For work, for life, yeah.
So we had back and forth. They were in and out of the Catholic school, in and out of the public school, and out of the French and English and such. And then after they graduated high school, we had one that was going into kinesiology. And sometimes people don't know what that is, but there's different terms for it. I don't know what another term would be. So she did her, Chloe did her degree in kinesiology, and Cassie had done her degree in psychology. And so Chloe stayed in Canada to do hers, and Cassie went over into the USA for hers. So she went over the border for school. And for us, it's just one little bridge away. So she was an international student for her schooling. And then when Chloe finished her degree, she did her master's in Barbados. So we had a combination with her university here was kind of a sister school, and that she has a dual degree now in so exercise and sports and also exercise and sport. So she has a dual degree in two. And then Cassandra, she stayed in the U.S. at the same school, and she did her psychology degree or a master's degree there. So she actually spent 6 years in one school, and she built such a community there. Cassandra ran the whole time. One of the things that I would like to say, both of the girls really depended on exercise and sports through school. They weren't necessarily really good students. They had to work really hard. And my husband's a really good tutor, especially when, he'd work away a few days a week and then come back, and they'd be sitting in the kitchen at the island, and he would have to help them with the French terminology, because when they're going in and out of English and French school, all of a sudden math terms are all in French. So he had to really tutor them, and he spent so much time with them, and that was great. And I just fed them. That's all I could do. And then when they both went away to their degrees, they still ran. They did cross country, they did track. And so now both of them are finished their masters and working in their field. And Cassandra's still over in Buffalo, waving over there, over the river. And even with her COVID thing, like she was over there. And so now she has a fella and she's living there. And now she's working for the U.S. and as a teacher for children with intellectual needs. So anything in autism or anything intellectual. So she's in a school and she's helping them, and she loves her students. And then Chloe is here in Canada still, and she's working in clinics with physio and such. So yeah, so they're both doing their thing.
And so you guys raised your kids and they found their careers, and then COVID. So how did that change things for you?
Well, I have a lot of interest like in the spiritual side of things, and I love to like delve into that kind of thing. And I knew that something was happening because the world was talking about, when the year 2000 was coming around, something's going to happen. And then when the year 2012 came around, something is going to happen. And so I knew that there were some things happening in the spiritual sense. So when the COVID thing happened, I said, I knew something was coming down the pike. And I said, the only thing I demand is that we're all under the same roof. So, and we were. So all of these times that they were away, luck would have it that we were all to stay in Canada together, and we were under the same roof, and I loved it. And my husband, because like I said, he was working for, we have a big canal system here, and he was working in that canal system. And then you have these multi-million-dollar shipping companies that are conversing with my husband. And he was on this other side of the wall where I was doing hairdressing. I had my little salon, and then he had his office. And I thought, his multi-million-dollar shipping people are not going to want to hear Cindy talking about whatever she talks about with her clients. So then I had to tell my clients that, that I was shutting down even after we did open up. But change the subject, actually, I wanted to say to my clients how what you're doing here with you supporting all the moms and that beautiful social bond that you're creating with your podcast and having all of these moms coming on, and that, people are sharing their stories. So to help, hold up and give somebody hope, or that happened with me in my hair salon. I felt like I excelled myself quicker because I could do what my clients did with what they were doing well. And then when I could see that they weren't doing well, I could tell myself, don't do that. Don't do that. So stay away. So I felt like I had a quickening as far as my learning curve. So if you keep this going and your clients or your watchers keep watching you, I think they could have a quickening as far as what to do and what not to do. Because you don't always have to experience those things for yourself in order to get the lessons out of it. And being a hairdresser was amazing. A lot of people really don't know that, but back in the ancient times, all the royals, they never let anybody touch their hair unless it was their priest or the priestess. So if you're choosing your hairdresser and you don't feel good about them, don't stay with them. Like, have a hairdresser that will have your best interest at heart. And not to be afraid that, to be beautified at the salon, because that's an important thing. And I just love that social bond that you created here on this platform. So thank you. And thank you to all the ladies that are going to watch for you.
Thank you for that. And I also think it's really, I know the hairdressers, so many people say the hairdressers are better than a therapist because you can just go and chat and get that connection and get the understanding without feeling like you're doing something terribly formal. It's more relaxed.
I agree. Maybe if you just met your hairdresser once or twice, and if you have a busy surrounding, it's not always that easy. And I was blessed with since the children were born, that I always had a home salon. And it's funny because when I was 17 and I went to work for that lady, she had a home salon. And I was thinking, oh, this is a little bit stale, but you grow into it. And then all of my clients grew with my age. So I kind of always had somebody in the same kind of thing. And then I got to experience we talked about everything because nobody was listening. And it was really great with that. And then I had people saying, oh, wait till you're going to be an empty nester. You're going to cry. Well, I was prepared a year ahead of time because I had all these ladies that were going through this. And it turned out it was my husband that had the empty nest problem. And that was one of those times where we were hitting the crash, because he was like traveling, and he was away 4 days a week, and then he'd be home the other days. And I was the one that was holding everything. And then it turned out that, all of a sudden he didn't know what to do with himself. It was an identity crisis for him too, because he spent so much time helping them with their homework. And then I just had to hold the fort until we got through it. And it turned out that I did my mourning like a year in advance. So I was the strong one for them when he went through it. And then we managed to get out of that. And then we, managed to have and we liked being together in the house. In fact, because we got married so quickly and got the children so quickly, we never had the dating. So then we had that second chance of dating, and I would never want anybody to miss that time of dating again. Like you have another chance when the kids are out of the house, or at least at school.
Until you have grandkids, and then you're busy with them coming along. So the transition from a busy mom to suddenly not having that incessant or constant demand on your time. You said you went through mourning. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I've never heard someone phrase it that way. It makes sense. But can you talk a little bit more about why it's a mourning process and how you go through it?
So the empty nester, is that familiar to you? So yes. So you invest everything in your pretty much your identity is being invested in being, the mom. I had that early on too. I remember when the kids were just 4 and they were going to school. And I remember calling up my mother on the phone, and they're in school, but they're just at the same block. They were far. And I said to my mother, I'm like, is this all there is? This is it? This is all I have to do? I'm like, what am I going to do now? Because I want more of that. Like, I don't want them to go to school yet. And I really believed that. I was hurting, and I believed that. And I thought, they're in school now, that I'm done. Like, I felt lost. And she said, no, you'll just do it in a different way. There'll be more for you. And to come to realize that quickly, that just because they're in school doesn't mean you're not a mother. So but I did feel that, and I had to like acknowledge that I felt that. And so with the empty nester coming around, and when they were really away for school and they weren't in the house, and you yeah, I felt like it was a loss of me, probably not so much a loss of my children because they're adult now, but I felt like I was losing part of me because I invested so much in that. So again, it's good to have keep your interest going and
Yeah.
not just be your yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I'm not there yet, but I can already see it. My mother is, retired recently, and my father will be retiring soon as well. And it's something my mom always cautioned us against. She said, don't rely on your kids to be your source of your self-esteem and your source of the only love, because they will grow up and leave. They're supposed to do that. You need to have something. You need to have who you are as well.
That's why I like that my work was also my social. And I didn't have to go anywhere for it. It came to my door like every day, like clockwork. People would come and it was social. Um, but then again, every time I would like get in the car and go somewhere and be social, like, oh yeah, I missed that. So I have to remind myself too that I need to get out and do that kind of thing, especially now that we're both retired. But like, who retires at 51? Like, it's amazing that I could be a hairdresser and still retire. And we made immense like sacrifices for that. We have this is our third house now, and we downsized so that we could make life more simpler. So it's not like we're living up the highlights and spending. And my husband has amazing with it. It's not just what you make, but it's what you spend. So if you can try to be, a little more thrifty and you don't have to like have everything that was all brand new. And I love doing that kind of thing, and that's fine. And I love being home. So that's interesting too. But I have like the other side of me where I kind of have like the counseling coaching thing that goes with my spiritual. So I still have a connection with people. And then, doing this kind of social thing with you, it's amazing that we have these platforms to come to my living or to my bedroom that we can share this with your other moms.
So you shifted into the counseling and coaching as well then?
It was an easy progression because with your saying, with your hairdresser, you're always, somebody's always telling them something. And I was always educating on like myself on other means, like taking my courses and not hair, but like the other. So, it was an easy progression with me. So I get able to do that. And you can do that from remote too. Like you can't do hair from a remote, but you can still do your other kind of counseling thingies when you're on your Zoom through the COVID thing. So that was good. That was a good filler for, but I'm wondering about those little kids at home. But I also wanted to bring that up too, so that right now we have a harder time being the influence on our children, because even when my kids were little, you lose that influence when the kids are in school and their social circles. And then now that's like, exponential with like the social media and then how they had to do school online. And so there's proof that says that, you use different parts of your brain whenever you're making eye contact. So not through a screen, like actual organic connections. So I would encourage mommies to like have playtime with their kids and to make sure that they get out there and they get that, even if you have to be with them for a while. There was some trauma that was happening with those home birthdays, and people didn't want to go. They'd rather do a Zoom birthday than a home birthday after COVID. Not my kids because they're older than that, but have you heard that during the COVID and after the whole thing? I don't know if the UK was as weird as we were in Canada, but it was pretty shocking. So yeah, so I encourage the kids to get out, but also too to have that mommy bond and daddy bond so that we can influence them in a healthy way.
You dropped some really good gems throughout this conversation. Some of your advice for the birth, and then also for the sleep, having how it's better to have the children with you and to give them that bonding time. And then just now what you said as well about the eye contact and all that sort of thing. These are the little things that I think are intuitive, but unless someone states it out loud, oftentimes we don't really put our attention there. a focus on it. If that makes sense.
So I feel like the children really need wise examples in their life, because that delicate age before they're 7, they have their intuition is wide open, and then when they go to school, it's all closed down, and so they they lose their imaginary friend. They lose the whole playing and talking to themselves, because it's not okay at school. And then it kind of like gets shunned if you still have your imaginary, if you're still a child. So I would try to say, let your child stay a child for as long as they can. And, they mimic us. So if we can be playful, then that'll help them. If we can be playful with them beyond their years of 7, 8, 9, and still be playful, I think that's a really good example.
Oh, I feel like that's something I should be putting on Instagram as a quote. That's a lovely way of stating it. And it saddens me that school drums out that creativity. It really should be celebrated and augmented instead. And I think a lot of schools are now seeing the benefit of that, but it is a very long and slow shift toward letting children be more creative. I know some countries really embrace it, but unfortunately, a lot of westernized countries don't do that so much. Yeah.
Read to our children too.
Sorry?
Read to our children.
Yes. Yes. So many benefits of reading to your kids. You've got the physical contact of sitting on mommy's lap and all those wonderful benefits. You've got, there's infinite benefits of reading to your kids, really. Mm-hmm. So many mental, social, physical, all of it. It's a big question. Cindy, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us before we finish?
Well, I shared a lot.
You did, yes.
Thanks everyone for listening to me. I could really go on, and that's because I'm a hairdresser and I just can't stop talking. But I thought about this, and I really wanted to work with your criteria as far as what you're doing with your podcast. So I prepared that, I wanted to share some of these nuggets. I'm sure I have a ton of things that I probably forgot. But again, the social bond between, the parents and the children, outside of the school, and the mommies between mommies, and, to really, and a mentor mommy, someone that's, like the grandmother, and let the grandmother be a part of, because they're looking at it from another point, or even just a neighbor mommy. I had the most wonderful neighbor mommy, and she really helped. And when she was young, or when the kids were young, and she was my neighbor, and she witnessed what was happening. And I was going somewhere with the kids, and then we were ready to go, and they were in the backyard, and they came out, and then something happened, and I was just about to tell them they weren't going, and then I said, "Oh, we're not going. Whatever. We'll go again." And I didn't really think too much of it. And then she said, "Wow, like they're not upset that they're not going." And I'm like, "Well, I guess not. They're just like playing in the backyard." She goes, "Wow, those kids are resilient." And I'm like, let's go look that up, because I have no idea what I just did and how this all happened, but it happened without me knowing. But if we could use that as a tool now to help our children be resilient, I think that's a really good tool.
Yeah. Resiliency is one of the core attributes that people need, especially with all the craziness that's happening in our world. We need to be resilient. We have to be.
So most of the things that I have gone through, I fell through life, and I'm lucky that somebody was steering me along. Like, I thought, I didn't really do a lot of this decision making on my own. And, but if we can be, aware and make those decisions on purpose, if we're not all the same personality that I have, then I think that's a really good thing to learn from, and say, okay, I want to do that. I want to make sure that I set the stage up, that when something happens and the children are doing what what they thought they were, and the distraction thing, instead of taking it away, but you can have this instead. And so give them something else if you can do that. That way, give them a choice to be resilient instead of like upset about the situation.
Yeah. So instead of just depriving, you provide an alternative, And then that helps them to engage with something that's worthwhile instead of just sitting there feeling like they've been robbed, whatever it was. Thank you for your time, Cindy. If people want to follow you or learn about your counseling or coaching or any of that, where would they go to look for your information?
So I really like the Facebook platform for this age of me ladies. I find that that's where a lot of this, a lot of the interaction comes. So I have my Facebook page is my maiden name first. I think I should change that, but it's Cindy Shonower Nolet, and I have my side business is called Ruby Vision Empowerment, and that's also on Facebook too. So I think those are the things. And then I can always drop my email. It's just my name, Cindy Nolet at hotmail.com. So I don't know if you put things in links after.
Yeah, we'll link it below. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are 3 easy ways. Yeah. And basically I'm always here.
Great.
Always here.
All right. Well, what I'll do is we'll finish up with the recording and I'll chat with you a little bit. And I just want to say thanks to everybody who has listened to Cindy's love story. It's a very nice, what would I say? It's just, it kind of makes you feel like there's hope for all the hard things that we go through in life. Thank you for that inspiration. It's really nice to have that light at the end of the tunnel for so many people who are going through the long, hard slog of taking care of little kids and running around and taking kids to all their different activities and things. So thank you so much. And we will see everyone again later. Have a good day.